Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this regular meeting of the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority Finance Committee for June 6, 2024. And with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Gary?
And next,
We're good. Okay. Disregard. Thank you.
continue. All right.
Marty Millibar's on.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, I will call the order. So starting with Chair Martin.
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you. Member Millibar. I see you. And Committee Member Palmer.
Say that one more time, sir.
All right.
I'm here. Did they hear me this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right,
Right.
all committee members are present. We can proceed, Mr. Martin.
All right. Thank you very much, Claudia. Before we go to item 3, approval of the minutes on this day, June 6th, the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion in Europe, and in recognition of the sacrifices made by those of the greatest generation that fought and died on the shores of Normandy, I'd like to stand and face the flag, put your hand over your allegiance. I pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, with the stand, one nation.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Could you tilt that this way a little bit? Because I just look like Kilroy peeking over the edge there.
Justice for all.
Can't see the
All right, tried. All right, let's.
Is it just me or are other folks having a hard time hearing
Yes.
Chair Martin?
Yes, that just started.
Move the microphone a little closer, the back on my chest. I'll put we're on item 3, approval of the minutes of the May 16th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve.
Motion by President Palmer. You have a
Second.
second, Martin?
No,
Second by Vice President Millibar. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Gladly. Chair Martin,
Aye.
thank you. Committee Member Millibar,
Aye.
thank you. And Committee Member Palmer,
Aye.
thank you. All right, meeting minutes approved. Jen, could you move to item 4A?
What I was moving to, 4A.
You could skip the board memo and go to the presentation, please. And you can,
Yes.
there we go, perfect.
All right, Mr. Bradner.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Committee Chair Martin. We have a presentation to support this agenda item. So if we could advance to the next slide, please. So the agenda for the presentation will touch base again on the timeline, which the committee is familiar with. Then we've got going back through the proposed now final FY 24-25 scope and budget with some minor revisions from the draft presented at the last committee meeting. Then we've got time for discussion, then culminating with recommendation request, which would, I think, be dependent on working through items 2 and 3. The recommendation request would be that the committee be prepared to recommend that the FY 24-25 budget be adopted by the full board at the June 20th meeting. Next slide, please. So here's our activity and timeline and schedule. So you can see the red bar on the lower portion of the graphic shows where we are today, June 6th. We've got our third Finance Committee meeting to finalize and prepare recommendations for the FY 24-25 budget. We did include a little bit of additional buffer if there are comments or revisions that need to be incorporated as a last step before the budget goes to the board in June at the June 20th meeting, which is indicated by that extra little bit of time that's offered to finalize the draft budget and get it ready for board adoption. Next slide, please. You can go ahead and progress again to the next. So touching base again on the work breakdown structure. So this is how all of our budgets are organized within the DCA. We have 3 current active phases. The program management office, which is the cross-organizational support functions throughout all phases of the program. So the PMO office would extend all the way through completion of the project through closeout and commissioning. Then we've got the program initiation phase, which is historically been where the engineering work to support the environmental permitting phase has been performed, as well as the geotechnical work that was collected under the ISM&D to support DWR's deliberations and evaluation of potential alternatives. Now that there is a preferred and selected project for further study with the conclusion of the EIR and issuance of the notice of determination, we've now opened up what's called the program delivery phase. At this point, the only activities within the program delivery phase are continued data collection activities. This is to support further study of a preferred project. So, but as the project progresses, eventually as we procure and then enter final design and construction phases of the project, those would all occur under this program delivery phase. So we've opened it up initially now to capture the geotechnical work associated with the preferred project. But then as time goes on, it is program delivery that would continue to expand. The program initiation phase, as I mentioned, which is really supporting the environmental permit phase, would end when all major permits have been attained and the program is positioned for implementation. So that would occur generally at a point after the Delta Plan consistency determination with the Delta Stewardship Council. So we're in a point now where we have 3 overlapping active phases: program management office, which will continue through completion of the project; program initiation, which is winding down, although that is where we will still perform the ongoing in-house engineering activities before we procure designers; and then program delivery, which is supporting the data collection of the preferred project. I think I'll pause here maybe to see if there's any questions on the work breakdown structure before we move into the remainder of the presentation. Hopefully that is, hopefully this is making sense to the committee. Okay, next slide, please. So here we have the proposed final FY 24-25 budget. There are a couple of revisions. Those are noted with the red text that you see in the table. So that third column on the right has been added compared to what was presented at the last Finance Committee presentation. We had the proposed draft budget in the middle there. That was presented back at the May 16th committee meeting. The overall amounts have not changed. The overall budget request has not changed. It's still $43,200,000. You can see a couple of changes within the work breakdown structure activities. The executive office has slightly increased. That's due to increasing the unallocated reserve associated with the budget. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second, as well as increasing some conference fees. So a very small change associated with the conference fees. And then down the property line item, activity code 150, we have a reduction of just slightly over 200,000. And that's associated with moving the assigned resource. We do intend to stand up a property manager for the next fiscal year. Initially, we had allocated that under one contract vehicle, but ultimately have decided to move that to one of our other small businesses with a lower rate. And so in doing that, we're saving about $200,000 associated with fulfilling that role. So that freed up some money that we've moved up into unallocated reserve. So that's where we've been able to, that's how we've been able to maintain the same top line budget amount. We shifted those funds that we freed up on the property and augmented unallocated reserve a little bit. Things were a little tight, a little lean initially, and so I do feel better having a little bit of extra funds in the unallocated reserve. Any yes,
question.
yes.
Yes, in terms of the property, moving $200,000 out of there, when you say it goes to another small business, so it's not that it's not there anymore, it's just it's been shuffled around, and to whom has it been shuffled to?
So yes, that's correct. It's not disappeared. The hours are the same. They've just moved from one contract to the other. So we're going to be using Bender Rosenthal, who is one of our small business real estate teams. They also have been providing a lot of the field coordination services and other critical services in the field associated with land. It seems like a logical place for the property manager contract or property manager role to be fulfilled. And we've had various conversations with different potential contracts where this role could be filled, and through an internal process have identified the best candidate as being through Bender Rosenthal.
And who did have it before?
We had tentatively parked it in the Jacobs contract, which is engineering. So that would have been another potentially logical place to source that resource. But through our internal conversations and evaluations have decided to shift that role over to Bender Rosenthal.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on this slide before we move forward? We've got more detail about the changes, so we can get into it in a little more detail unless there's questions here before we move forward. Okay, so this is the budget by vendor table. And again, the changes are flagged in red text, although I must admit they're a little bit hard to see. So now this is just a slightly different view of the same information. So this is now looking at it by contract vehicle instead of by WBS. I think this really highlights one of the concepts within the program is it is a matrix cross-organizational structure. So our WBS does not mimic or follow our contracts. We have contractors that cross WBS code, which is to be expected. So just dealing with the changes that I described ends up affecting multiple contracts, even though in reality, the real estate property conversation only affected really one one code within the WBS. I will also highlight the change that you see for AECOM, the reduction from 9.9 million down to 9.3. That was just really an error in this spreadsheet. Having it in at 9.9 was not correct. So we've fixed that and corrected it in this summary table. It was not included in the additions that I showed on the previous slide. So it didn't change the top line numbers or anything like that. It was just in erroneously. So setting that one aside, what you see are changes from Jacobs, a reduction associated with moving that real estate person from the Jacobs contract, and then the increase down in Bender Rosenthal's contract representing the moving of that scope and requirement from Jacobs into Bender Rosenthal. And then the very small change in the Parsons budget of about 6,000 as I mentioned, associated with conference fees, increasing the conference fees, which are routed through our Parsons contract. Any questions about the vendor budget by vendor changes?
Just for says FY 24-25 proposed budget. Is that what we saw on base in the May meeting?
Yes, the middle column FY 24-25 is what we had at the May committee meeting. That's correct. Okay, next slide, please. So we do have some additional materials that I'd like to pull up and see if there's any questions. We did update the FY 24-25 budget summary in detail. So this is the more detailed information that compared the current fiscal year 23-24 to next fiscal year 24-25 as a side-by-side presentation. We did have a couple of other addition errors in the FY 23-24 summary that we've corrected. as well as also just updating and reflecting the revisions that I just described in the more detailed presentation. So those are all in that comparative document. Then we've got a new presentation of information, the FY 24-25 budget detail by vendor, which was a very large table in the packet, but it's best used electronically. But that actually allows for a complete circle with respect to the information. You can connect the dots between the budget by vendor on the previous table and then the budget by WBS that preceded that. The budget detail by vendor enables the full connection of all that information. So we can go to those exhibits if that would be helpful, and if there's any questions, we can deal with it there. So I think we need to get out of the presentation for a minute and just pull those exhibits up, please. So not this one. Let's go to the next. We've already talked about this one. So now there's this table, which has been revised to capture the changes that I described, as well as also unfortunately capturing a couple addition errors in the FY 23-24. Let's just pause here to see if there's any questions. I guess if it's helpful, maybe Claudia, let's go to the very large table, the budget by vendor table, and I can just talk a little bit about what this is. So as you see, each vendor is across the top. That same WBS information is down the left side. The activity totals there are in column G. So those rack up to the $43 million budget at the very, very bottom. That totals up to the $43,200,000. But what it does that is new information is by each of those contracts flags where there is an amount of money dedicated to that contract, and those values total between the program management office, program initiation, and program delivery end up totaling the values that are identified in the budget by vendor table, that blue table with the red text on it. So now you can connect the dots between the WBS cost distributions and the contract distributions. So as you work your way down, so there's summing in multiple directions. There's summing to the left to total up for the activities, and then there's summing vertically down to the bottom by contract.
I have a quick question. Where you have the errors that were done with the 23-24, when this is presented to the board, are you going to leave those errors in there and just explain them, or are they going to be corrected for when the full board sees this?
It would be, I guess, my preference to just show the latest. So the information that we're sharing with you now is fully corrected in terms of the 23-24 edition errors. So I guess it would be my preference, but it's, I think, certainly up to the committee if you'd prefer it differently.
Well, if there is an error in there, I think it would be good, maybe to make it a color or something like that, that would draw attention to the fact that this was an error, and here it has been corrected in the next column. Does that
Which
make
version
sense?
Did the board last see, right?
So the error that we're talking about is within some of the sort of internal summing that happens for the various activities. It was reflected in the information shared only to the committee at the May committee meeting. And so by bringing back the corrections here, I think we've straightened that out as far as what the public has seen. But again, I guess it would be my recommendation that we sort of stick to the clean and corrected information for the board meeting in June.
Yeah,
I agree with Radner not to bring up errors and stuff like that. I think it would confuse the discussion.
yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you that we need not confuse it. We need to just have a clean presentation all the way through.
Right.
And if I may, just for further clarification to add to Graham's point, it was a formula error that wasn't drawing on, or it wasn't including a couple of the numbers, but ultimately the top number where it rolls up was because that we built in safeguards within the spreadsheets to make sure that the calculations do add up to that top number. So
Great. Mark also agrees. Sarah, you okay with that?
So that means, could you just repeat? I understand you built in the safeguards in terms of the algorithm written. So when we look at the line items, are you going to continue to show the ones that were added incorrectly, or are you going to clean it up all the way through?
So the spreadsheet the information that you see now has all been corrected. You know, Claudia, if you could go back to the one above, please, the comparative side by side, and then take us to no, not there, Claudia, back down to the mid-level, to level 3, and then take us to where the error was corrected, please.
So one would have been here, as you can see, there's like 3 different vendors that roll up to these bolded numbers here. So the formulas embedded here are supposed to do a sum of everything below, and then this final total here does a sum of those subtotals. And so the safeguard there is that it'll pick up the sums to make sure that it's not double counting. And so that was one of the things that was caught in this review cycle.
So was it double counting as you were looking at this review? I just want to
No.
clarify what the issues
No.
were. Okay, if there was a problem, could we at least put an asterisk or something with maybe a footnote?
So I guess I'm not sure what we would be footnoting. I mean, the number of 40.44 million doesn't change for the fiscal year. And it was a number that, well, you know what I suppose we could do would be to flag it. Well, I guess I'm just not sure what we would be flagging it for. It's been something that we have shared only within the committee, and we've now updated it and are resharing it as corrected.
And if I could add to your comment, Graham, so this is for fiscal year 24-25, which is not something that we typically show at the board meeting.
No, sorry, 23-24, Claudia.
Yeah. So at the board meeting, we don't do the comparison. Usually when we do the comparison, has been when we do the preview of the budget to show the comparison of the current fiscal year versus the proposed fiscal year budget for the following year. So I defer to Graham and the committee to determine if this is something that they want to also show for the presentation on June 20th.
I wouldn't think it would be necessary to show it for the presentation, but I would like kind of an historical backstory that this is something that has been corrected. Does that make sense? It's transparency.
Is it as simple as putting something in like the board memo, Sarah, or a footnote, like you mentioned down at the bottom of this particular spreadsheet? We can make a note that there was here underneath the.
Yeah, but I would just like maybe put asterisks and say these have been corrected from blah, blah, blah. Just as a footnote, just to keep it kind of historically accurate.
So if it doesn't conflict with something serves
You
to,
cut out, Gary.
okay.
I just worry that we just, especially with the money and stuff, we just need to be so transparent.
Okay, I got a new microphone, so maybe you can hear me now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds better. Yes.
Okay, so my point was, Sarah, if what we're gonna present at the June 20 meeting doesn't conflict with something the full board has already seen, I'm not sure what purpose it serves to highlight some minor math errors that were made in the spreadsheet in the review process.
No, I don't think we need to, okay, let me, maybe I'm sounding too complicated here, but I just think that, because, excuse me, it's not something that one would present in the final presentation. It doesn't come up, but kind of as the backstory, in case anybody ever has to go back to it, it's not brought up in the final presentation at all. But it would be good to asterisk it and put a footnote for historical context.
All right.
You know, this is Marty. I really think you're emphasizing a mathematical, correction, and there's nothing that, I mean, it's just a good process to refine it as they did, but
No, I think it's good what they did, but I just think math is math, and you gotta show your work.
well, I think you're making too much of it, Sarah. This thing needs to be corrected and not say, okay, we had a mistake here, we had a mistake here, and then everybody said, well, there's probably mistakes everywhere. And you're gonna kind of open a can of worms that's not really there.
You're gonna open a can of worms if somebody goes back and says, oh, you have a mistake here and here, and you didn't note it anywhere, and then they'll say, well, you have a mistake that you didn't know
Okay,
number two.
so
I strongly feel that math is math, and you gotta make it work, and it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's just a footnote.
So if I could make a proposal, I think at this point, we flagged the changes in the other elements of this packet. And so we should probably just flag the changes in this packet as well, and then reissue it. We flagged the changes here. We probably should have put some sort of color coding or something in that other table that had corrections in it, and then we can augment with a footnote. And I think Committee Palmer, is that what you're after? Just the fact that we made corrections in there that are not flagged?
Yeah, and we don't have to be presenting it to the full board. It doesn't become one of the big presentations, but at least it's historically there, and we've made a note of it, and that's it.
So Committee Chair Martin, would that be acceptable to you? We would just
I guess it's okay with that. I'm kind of with Martin on the fact that we don't necessarily need to do this, but if Sarah thinks it needs to be done, let's go ahead and do it. It's a harmless thing to do. My thought was perhaps we save the various versions of the spreadsheet for historical purposes in the process, but maybe that's not going to do it. So, okay, I'm okay with a footnote.
great.
It's a scientist in me, sorry.
And just for further clarification, this was something that was in column for the FY 23-24, not for the proposed FY 24-25.
Just that one column, the 23-24.
Correct.
Are there any other questions about the information provided?
I have none, no.
I know, a thing looked at this.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then I think, Claudia, we can go back to the presentation, please. So pause right there for 1 second.
Oh.
So just so that it's clear, yeah, go back up to the blue table, Claudia, the budget detailed by vendor information that's been added. So when you follow that and sum it down to the bottom, it matches these contract amounts that have been summarized here. So previously it was not possible to, between the WBS information we provided and the contract budget by vendor information we provided, it was not really possible to fully connect those two points of information together. And it's the detailed budget by vendor that would now allow for that connection. And you can trace these numbers, the numbers that are shown here is the final FY 24-25 proposed budget numbers, match all the values that are summed across the bottom of that detailed budget by vendor. So you can see where those vendor costs are aligned with each WBS code as well as with the total contract amount. So hopefully that makes sense.
Looks really good.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So in that case, I think we can move to the recommendation slide. So
All
this
right,
would be, go ahead.
I think Graham has, and staff have done a good job of explaining where these numbers come from. I know that originally, some time back, I made the point that I approved various budgets without knowing exactly where these numbers came from. Now I do, and I appreciate the detail that they've added to the budget, and I'm prepared to move forward with a recommendation. So I would entertain a motion to agree with the staff recommendation that the staff recommends that the DCA Finance Committee recommended by motion that the Board of Directors adopt the proposed budget for FY 24-25.
I move we approve it.
All right, that's a motion, Sarah, because I didn't hear much.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Sarah, second by Martin. Let's take the roll. Let's call the roll.
All right. Chair Martin,
Yes.
Committee Member Millibar,
Yes.
and Committee Member Ms. Palmer.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion passes.
All right.
Fantastic. Should we go back to the agenda?
Okay, back to the original agenda, and we are at item 5, reports and announcements. 5A, are there any verbal reports today? Seeing none, hearing none, I think we're ready to go to item 6, public comment. Do we have any public commenters wanting to make public comment?
Director,
You Ruth.
sorry. Chair Martin, we have
Yes.
not received any public comment requests for
Excellent.
any of the items on the agenda, including this one.
Excellent. Then we are ready to go to item 7, adjournment. Unless there's an objection, we're hereby adjourned. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Josh, and the rest of the staff for making this a relatively painless process, and we are adjourned.